There is a white powder sitting in a 50-pound sack at your local feed store right now. It costs about $12. It kills every crawling bug in your house. Roaches, bed bugs, fleas, ticks, ants. And it keeps killing them from a single application for years. The pest control industry, which pulls in over $27 billion a year in this country, has spent the better part of 70 years pretending this powder either does not work or is too dangerous for ordinary people to handle. Neither is true. My name is Eli, and I am going to tell you exactly what this powder is, where to buy it for under $15, how to apply it in your kitchen and your basement, and why every exterminator who has ever knocked on your door already knows about it and refuses to use it. My grandfather in Lancaster County never paid an exterminator a single dollar in 83 years on this earth. This is why my grandfather kept a 50-pound sack of this powder in the woodshed. He died in 1987 at the age of 91. He never owned a can of bug spray, he never called an exterminator, and the farmhouse I grew up in did not have a single roach or a single bed bug in 80 years. The powder is called Diatomaceous earth. I am telling you the name right up front because the name is not the secret. The secret is how you use it, why it works, and why the people who make their living killing bugs will not touch it. And before you decide this only applies to a farm, let me stop you. If you have a house with wood baseboards, a kitchen with a refrigerator, a bedroom with a bed frame, or a basement with cracks in the floor, this is for you. The house you already own, the bugs you already have. This weekend, I told you the pest control industry has hidden this for 70 years. Now I am going to show you exactly why. But first you have to understand what this powder actually is, because once you understand what it is, you will understand why no bug on Earth can develop a resistance to it. And once you understand that, you will start to wonder, the way I wondered, how something this simple and this cheap got buried so thoroughly that a grown man can reach 60 years old having never once heard its name. The answer to that question is the real story here. The powder is just the powder. The reason you were never told about it is the part that should make you angry. Diatomaceous earth is made from something so old it was already ancient when the dinosaurs walked. Somewhere between 5 and 23 million years ago, vast inland seas covered much of what is now Nevada, Oregon, and California. In those waters there bloomed, in numbers beyond counting, tiny single-celled organisms called diatoms. A single diatom is so small that 1,000 of them lined up end to end would barely span the width of your fingernail. But here is the remarkable part. Each one builds itself a shell, not of calcium, not of bone, but of pure silicon dioxide, the same material as window glass. When the diatom dies, the soft body washes away, and the little glass shell drifts down and settles on the bottom. Over millions of years, layer on layer of these glass skeletons piled up and pressed into white deposits hundreds of feet thick. In the town of Lompoc, California, there is a single open-pit mine where the deposit runs over 700 feet deep across 1,400 acres, and it has been mined since 1893. But forget the geology for a moment. What matters is what those glass skeletons do to a bug. Under a microscope, a single particle of diatomaceous earth looks like a piece of shattered glass, with edges sharper than any razor blade a factory has ever made, pocked with thousands of tiny holes that soak up oil and fat like nothing else in nature. When an insect walks across a thin film of this dust, 3 things happen almost at once, and any one of them alone would be enough to kill it. First, the glass edges score and slice the waxy coating on the bug's shell. Every insect, from the smallest grain weevil to the biggest palmetto roach, is sealed against the world by a thin layer of wax that holds its moisture in. Bugs do not have lungs like we do. They breathe through little holes along their sides, and they depend on that wax to keep from drying out. The dust scratches straight through it. Second, those thousands of tiny holes in the dust begin to wick the oils and waxes right out of the bug's body, pulling them into the powder the way a paper towel pulls up a spill. Third, the dust clings to the bug and rides back into the nest, the cracks, the egg cluster, where the whole thing happens again to every bug it touches. The result is death by drying out. The bug turns into a raisin from the inside, and here is the part that no chemical company can match. A bug cannot evolve resistance to being sliced open and dried out any more than a man can evolve resistance to being stabbed. Think about what resistance actually is. When you spray a chemical poison, a few bugs in every population happen to carry a gene that lets them survive it. Those few breed, their offspring carry the gene. Spray again and a few more survive. Within a handful of generations, and insect generations are measured in weeks, the whole population is immune and your expensive chemical is water. That is the entire story of modern pest control, repeated over and over with every new product, but there is no gene for surviving broken glass. There is no enzyme a bug can produce to unscratch its own shell or to put the water back into its dried out body. This is why diatomaceous earth has been used since the mid-1800s without one single documented case of pest resistance anywhere in the world in any species. Meanwhile, the synthetic sprays your exterminator uses have, according to a 2016 study in the Journal of Medical Entomology, become functionally useless against more than 80% of the bedbug population sampled across 14 American cities. The chemicals get weaker every year. The powder is exactly as deadly today as it was in 1857. Now let me tell you why the Amish are the reason this powder survived at all. When the chemical salesmen came through rural Pennsylvania in the late 1940s with their bright pamphlets and their promises of effortless pest control, most of American agriculture threw out every old method and embraced DDT, chlordane, dieldrin, and the long parade of poisons that would each, in turn, be banned as their dangers became impossible to ignore. The Amish did not. Their way of life, governed by the Ordnung, the unwritten code of each church district, places strict limits on anything that creates dependency on the outside world. So they sent the salesmen politely on their way and went back to the white powder their grandmothers had taught them to use, and this was not a small habit kept alive in one corner. In the dairy barns of Holmes County, Ohio, which is home to the largest Amish settlement in the world, with roughly 37,000 members, diatomaceous earth has been used to control flies since at least 1910. The standard practice, taught to every young man who takes over a family dairy, is to mix the dust into the bedding straw, about 1 pound of powder to 50 pounds of straw. The cows lie down in it. The dust clings to their hides and to the manure they drop. The flies that land on the cows and the flies that hatch from the manure die within hours, and the dust passes harmlessly straight through the cow. There is a man named Daniel Stoltzfus, born in Lancaster County in 1908, who was interviewed in 1991 by a folklorist from Penn State. That recording still sits on cassette in the archives of the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center. In it, Stoltzfus describes how his mother dusted the chicken coop every spring. She would take an old hand-crank flour sifter and walk the coop, sifting the white dust onto the roosts, into the nesting boxes, along the cracks where the boards met the foundation. Within a week, he said, every mite was dead, every louse, every flea. The hens stopped scratching themselves bloody and started laying again. And the powder cost his mother, in 1916, about 30 cents for a 50-pound sack delivered to the train station at Strasburg. That is about $9 in today's money. For 50 pounds, a professional treatment for one chicken coop today runs you $200 to $400, and afterward you throw away the eggs for a week or two. The economics are not close. They are not in the same arithmetic. So you might ask, if this powder is this good, this cheap, this safe, why has it not become the standard tool of the pest control business? Why does the man from the big company show up with a sprayer of synthetic chemicals instead of a bucket of white dust? And I want to be careful here, because this is not about a few men in a smoke-filled room. It is simpler and colder than that. The entire business of modern pest control is built on recurring revenue, on the quarterly visit, on the service contract. And diatomaceous earth, applied correctly, does not generate recurring revenue. It generates a one-time treatment that lasts in a dry indoor space essentially forever. The dust does not break down in sunlight the way the sprays do. It does not evaporate. It does not get eaten by soil microbes. A single application in a wall void, under a refrigerator, behind a baseboard, will keep killing bugs for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, as long as it stays dry and undisturbed. There are grain silos dusted in the 1970s that, sampled decades later, were still killing weevils. Compare that to a service contract that runs $400 to $1,200 a year and uses chemicals that lose 90% of their punch within 90 days. From the standpoint of a publicly traded company answering to shareholders, the math is brutal. Diatomaceous earth is the LED light bulb of the bug world. The industry has treated it exactly the way the lighting industry treated the LED, by ignoring it and quietly hoping you never notice. There is a regulatory wrinkle on top of that. When the EPA began categorizing pesticides after 1970, diatomaceous earth was placed in a special category called minimum risk pesticides under Section 25B of the federal law. That means it is exempt from the heavy registration that chemicals like permethrin require. Sounds like a victory. In practice, it created a trap. Because the powder cannot be patented, cannot be branded as a proprietary formula, cannot be sold under an exclusive license, no chemical company has the slightest reason to advertise it, to train technicians to apply it, or to develop equipment for it. So the average person has heard of Raid, has heard of Ortho, has heard of every brand on the shelf, and has never once heard of food-grade diatomaceous earth, even though it is safer and cheaper and longer lasting than any of them. The Amish never had a marketing problem because they never had marketing. They had grandmothers. And it turns out a grandmother is a more reliable way to pass down practical knowledge than a Super Bowl commercial. Now I have to stop and give you the single most important warning in this entire video, because it is the one place where the industry's caution actually has merit. You must buy the food grade variety. Not pool grade, not industrial grade, food grade. There are two kinds of this powder, and they are not interchangeable. Food-grade diatomaceous earth, by law, contains less than 1% of something called crystalline silica, and the products on the shelf typically test between 0.5% and 0.8%. That is the safe one. The Amish have used it for 2 centuries. Pool filter grade, on the other hand, has been heat-treated in a process called calcining, and it contains up to 60% crystalline silica. That form can damage your lungs if you breathe it over time, and it should never be used for pest control anywhere near people or animals. So when you buy this powder, the bag must say food grade. If the bag does not say food grade, put it back. This is not a small distinction. It is the whole difference between a substance so gentle that it is approved by the FDA as an anti-caking agent in livestock feed and one that can genuinely harm you. Buy food grade. Say it with me. Food grade. With that understood, let me give you the 3 rules the Amish learned through generations of trial and error, because almost every first-timer gets all 3 wrong. But before the rules, I want to say one more thing about just how safe the food-grade powder is, because most people do not believe me the first time. Food-grade diatomaceous earth is approved by the FDA as an anti-caking agent in livestock feed at concentrations up to 2%. That means there are bags of cattle and chicken feed on the market right now with this exact powder mixed into them, and the cows and hens that eat it produce the milk, the eggs, and the beef that you have almost certainly eaten at some point in your life without ever knowing. The FDA lists it as generally recognized as safe, the same designation it gives to table salt and baking soda. The Amish themselves are so confident in it that many families keep a sack in the pantry for the kitchen and a sack in the barn for the animals, and they handle it with bare hands every week of their lives. Studies of farm workers who have handled food-grade diatomaceous earth daily for decades have found no elevated rate of any disease tied to skin contact or handling. The only real health concern, and I already told you about it, is breathing large clouds of the dust over long periods, and that risk drops to nearly nothing once the powder has settled into a thin film. So with the food-grade variety in your hands and a dust mask on your face during application, you are working with one of the safest pest control substances ever discovered. Now, the 3 rules. The first rule is a thin film, never a thick pile. Your instinct when you see bugs is to dump a lot of powder. That is wrong. Insects can see a thick pile of dust and will walk around it. What kills them is a thin, almost invisible film, the kind you can barely make out on a dark surface unless you tilt a light across it. The bug does not perceive it as an obstacle, so it walks straight through. The Amish use a small hand bellows, sometimes called a puffer duster, that looks like a turkey baster crossed with a little accordion, to lay the dust down in the thinnest possible layer along baseboards, into outlets, under appliances, into the cracks between floorboards. A single 1-pound bag, applied this way, can treat an entire average home with powder to spare. The second rule is that it only works dry. Wet diatomaceous earth is useless. The glass edges cannot cut when they are coated in water, and the holes cannot soak up oil when they are already full. So apply it in dry places and reapply after anything that wets it. Indoors, this is rarely a problem. Outdoors, rain and dew will deactivate it, so outdoor work is for dry weather and gets redone after every real rain. The third rule is the hardest one, and it is patience. This powder does not kill on contact. It kills on contact plus time. A bug that walks through it will usually die within 1 to 3 days. People who expect a pile of dead roaches the next morning get discouraged and run back to the spray can. The Amish, who think in generations rather than in quarters, simply apply the dust and wait. Within a week, the infestation starts to collapse. Within 2 weeks, it is usually gone. Within a month, even the eggs that hatched after you applied it have crawled through the residue and died. The powder does not announce its kills. The bugs simply quietly stop existing. Let me show you what that looks like in the real world. In the summer of 2009, an extension agent from the University of Wisconsin named Phil Pelletieri got called out to a small Amish dairy outside Cashton in Monroe County. The farmer, an older man named Joseph Yoder, had a brutal infestation of stable flies in his milking parlor. The flies were biting his cows so badly that the herd's milk production had dropped by nearly 30%. Yoder did not want commercial fly spray, both for religious reasons and because he sold his milk to an organic cooperative and worried about residue. Pelletieri, who had studied integrated pest management for over 30 years, suggested food-grade diatomaceous earth. Yoder remembered his own father using it and agreed. They dusted about 12 pounds through the milking parlor, up into the rafters where the flies rested, along the gutters, into the corners, lightly across the manure area. Within 10 days, Pelletieri came back to find the fly population down an estimated 92% on the sticky trap counts. Yoder's milk production was back to normal within 3 weeks. The whole treatment cost about $28. A chemical job, by Pelletieri's own notes, would have cost $400 to $600 and forced Yoder to dump milk for days. Pelletieri wrote it up in a small extension bulletin that, as far as I can tell, has been cited about 4 times in the 15 years since. No chemical company reprinted it. No trade association invited him to speak on it. It simply sat in its own quiet corner, ignored, while the industry sold hundreds of millions of dollars of fly spray to dairy farmers every single year. So, here is what I want you to do. Everything I have pulled out of these communities, every method, every buried study, every technique from this channel is gathered in one place in the description below. It is called the Amish Home System. Now, stay right here, because what comes next is the part I built this whole video around. The specific bugs, the specific studies, and the exact way you put this powder to work in your own home. Let me start with the bug everyone is afraid of now, bed bugs. A man in Holmes County wrote to me about a bed bug problem so bad his family was sleeping in the living room. Here is what I told him, and here is what the research says. In a 2013 study published in the journal Insects, researchers at Purdue and Rutgers tested food-grade diatomaceous earth against a synthetic chemical called deltamethrin, which is one of the most common professional bedbug treatments in the country. The diatomaceous earth reached 100% mortality within 10 days. The deltamethrin reached about 44% over the same 10 days because the bedbugs had developed resistance to it. Let that sink in. The cheap, unpatented, 200-year-old folk powder beat the modern professional chemical by more than 2 to 1 because the powder kills mechanically and you cannot evolve resistance to broken glass. And yet when you call a bedbug exterminator today, what they spray is usually deltamethrin or a cousin of it. They charge you between $1,500 and $4,000. They tell you you will need 3 follow-up visits, and they already know, because their own trade journals say so, that the treatment fails about half the time. The man in Holmes County dusted his bed frame seams, his baseboards, his outlets, and the cracks in his floor. 3 weeks later, he wrote back. He was sleeping in his own bed. Roaches are even more striking. German cockroaches, the small brown ones that infest apartments and restaurants, die at rates above 95% within 3 days of contact, according to work out of the University of Florida and the University of Kentucky. The bigger American roaches, the palmetto bugs, take a little longer because of their thicker shells, but mortality still runs above 90% within 5 days. Oriental roaches, brown-banded roaches, smoky brown roaches, they all show the same weakness to the powder. The trick, every time, is to put the dust where the roaches travel and hide. And roaches hide in places most people never think to treat. Into wall voids, under the refrigerator, where the warm motor and the crumbs make a roach paradise. Behind the dishwasher, into the cracks where the counter meets the wall, into the electrical outlets which are open highways through your walls. Along the tops of the cabinets, up high where nobody dusts, because that is where the wandering roaches leave their scent trails for the young ones to follow. You treat the highways and the harborages, not the open floor, because the open floor is not where they live. Fleas are the same story. Cat fleas cause nearly every flea infestation in American homes, even in houses with only dogs, and diatomaceous earth worked into carpets, pet bedding, and the cracks of hardwood floors cuts the population by more than 90% within 2 weeks. The dust kills the adult fleas within hours and stops the eggs from ever completing their development, which breaks the cycle that makes fleas so maddening to get rid of. The Amish, who keep working dogs for herding and guarding, have dusted it lightly into the fur for over a century, brushing it down to the skin, always outdoors on a calm day with the dog standing on a sheet, and the powder kept well away from the animal's face so it does not breathe a cloud of it. For ants, the Amish have a mixture they sometimes call Lancaster dust. They combine the food-grade diatomaceous earth with a little finely ground borax and some powdered sugar. The sugar draws the ants in. The borax poisons them from the inside, the dust kills on contact. In experienced hands, that mixture can clear even a stubborn carpenter ant problem in a few weeks. Ticks are a harder case, and I want to be straight with you about it. Ticks do not wander the way fleas and roaches do. They climb up onto a blade of grass, wait for a host to brush past, and grab on. So dusting your baseboards does nothing for them. But diatomaceous earth worked into the leaf litter and the mulch beds at the edges of your lawn, where the ticks actually wait, does cut their numbers, and it has to be redone after rain. A study at the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station in 2017 documented real reductions in deer tick populations after the powder was applied to leaf litter along the borders of lawns. The Amish themselves never leaned on the powder for ticks. They lean on guinea fowl and chickens, which are voracious tick eaters and will clear a yard better than any dust. But for those of you without a flock of guineas patrolling the property, the edge of lawn treatment is a real tool. And for grain pests, the weevils and beetles and meal moths that get into your flour and cornmeal, this powder is so effective the USDA approves it for certified organic grain storage. A great deal of the organic grain in your grocery store has been protected with it at some point on its way to you. There are families in Lancaster County who will show you grain bins last treated in 1976 that have not had a weevil since. 48 years from one application. Now, I am going to be honest with you, the way an Amish father is honest with his son. This powder is not magic, and it is not the answer to every single problem. It struggles in very humid places, above about 75% humidity, because the dust soaks up the moisture in the air and loses its bite. It is a little unsightly if you look closely, a faint white line along a dark baseboard, and it only kills bugs that actually walk through it, so you have to treat everywhere a bug could crawl, harbor, or rest, leaving no safe corner. That is more work than spraying, but it is far more reliable, and it does not poison your home to do it. When you go to buy it, food-grade diatomaceous earth is easy to find. Farm supply stores, garden centers, health food stores, the big online retailers. Expect to pay $8 to $15 for a 4-pound container, $25 to $40 for 10 pounds. The brand barely matters as long as the bag says food grade and the product is meant for agriculture or human use, not pool filtration. For applying it, you want a duster. The cheapest option is a little plastic squeeze bottle with a narrow tip, the kind sold for $5 at any beauty supply store as a hair dye bottle. A hand bellows runs $15 to $30. Lay a thin, barely visible film along the routes the bugs travel and into the spaces where they hide, and leave it in place at least 2 weeks before you clean. One real caution, even with the safe food-grade powder, do not breathe clouds of it while you apply. Wear a simple dust mask, especially in a closed room, and do not let your pets walk through fresh piles. Apply it, let it settle for an hour or two, and then everyone can walk across the thin residue with no trouble at all. Once it is settled into a film, it poses no breathing risk. It is only the cloud during application you want to avoid. There is one last thing I want to leave you with, because it is the deepest reason the Amish and the chemical industry will never see bugs the same way. But first, a piece of history that still bothers me. In 1972, when the EPA finally banned DDT, there was a brief moment, lasting maybe 2 or 3 years, when several major American farm publications ran articles asking what pest control should look like in a world without DDT. A few of them, including one in Successful Farming in November of 1972 and one in Mother Earth News in March of 1973, named Diatomaceous earth as a promising answer. For a moment, there was a real chance that American agriculture might turn toward mechanical and biological control instead of marching deeper into synthetic chemistry. That chance did not survive. By 1975, the chemical companies had rolled out the synthetic pyrethroids, sold as the safe successor to DDT, and the conversation about the white powder quietly faded from the mainstream farm press. The pyrethroids would eventually hit their own resistance wall, exactly as we are watching now with bedbugs, but in the moment they bought the industry another 40 years of dominance. The Amish, of course, took no part in any of it. They had never used DDT, they had never used pyrethroids. They simply kept using the same white powder their grandmothers used, watching from the fence line as the English cycled through one failed chemical after another. And here we are, all these decades later, in a world where bedbugs shrug off most of the chemicals sold to kill them, where the answer has been sitting in 50-pound sacks at the feed store the whole time. The Amish do not aim for a house where no insect ever exists. They aim for balance. An Amish farmer does not panic at a single fly in the barn. He acts only when the population starts to threaten his animals or his crops, and then he uses the smallest intervention that restores the balance. He does not bomb his home with poison over one ant. He lays a thin line of white powder along the ant's trail, and he waits. That patience, that acceptance, that you cannot and should not sterilize the whole living world, is a quiet kind of wisdom that suburban America mostly forgot. Diatomaceous earth fits that wisdom because it is not a weapon of mass destruction. It kills only what crawls through it. It leaves no poison behind, builds no resistance, and never has to escalate. It is, in the truest sense, a peaceable powder for a peaceable people. So buy a 4-pound bag of food-grade diatomaceous earth. Buy a $5 squeeze bottle. Apply a thin film where the bugs walk, and then be patient. Within 2 to 4 weeks, in most cases, your pest problem will simply stop, and it will stay stopped as long as the dust stays dry and in place. You will have spent about $15 total. You will have used a powder so gentle it is approved as an anti-caking agent in the feed your livestock eat, and you will have done what my grandmother did, what her grandmother did, what every Amish woman in Lancaster County has done for 200 years. You will have taken your home back. The white powder works. It always has. It always will, and now you know.